If one looks at transport in the present and last century, it's obvious that the steam engine is more than just a symbol of man's achievement. Which is why the end of the line, in the real and most poignant sense, is such a nostalgic sight. Here at Stratford Works in East London, old locomotives are being cut up for scrap metal at the rate of 2 or 3 every week. Ironically enough, this train graveyard is the place where some of them were actually built. Now, having been replaced in northeast London by an electric service, over 50 tank engines, as they're called, have been withdrawn from service and are being converted into scrap.
From the engine of the past is born the engine of the future.
Trains. From steam locomotives to diesel electric, we all know trains. So why don't we see steam trains anymore? Well, in short, a lot of them were scrapped and replaced with more modern engines. Some are preserved, however. However, not a lot of them are, because in short, it's expensive to preserve trains.
We're cargo moving people. We do it every day.
One example of this is the outdoor section of the Railroad Museum of Pennsylvania. The engines are covered in rust and some are even complete. Railroads were such an important part of American history, from the transcontinental to today's Amtrak. Locomotives and railroads need to be taken better care of. The main reason the engines aren't preserved or taken good care of is the funds aren't there. But what if they were? I've interviewed Michael Spaeth on the matter. Let's see what he has to say.
My name is Michael Spaeth. I do think we should provide more funds for rail travel based on the fact that I think our current rail system is inadequate. I think the most important thing trains have done in U.S. history is linking the eastern part of the country to the western part of the country and making it able for people and for goods to travel across the country with very few roadblocks. Do I think we should preserve and restore older trains? I think older trains have their place for historic value. I also think, though, that we should focus on modernizing our train system and look towards trains that travel at a more rapid speed and get goods and people from place to place at a quicker pace. Diesel or steam locomotives? Difficult question. I think if we're looking at modern locomotives, we're dealing with diesel. If we're looking at older ones, we're looking at steam-powered ones. I think there are alternatives to both of those. If I had to pick the two, I would want to pick the one that is more efficient. As it is right now, I suppose diesel combustion engines are more efficient than steam-powered engines. But I think there are even more alternative fuel sources that we could use that would produce less pollutants into the atmosphere. Do I have a favorite train? Gosh, I mean, as someone who has had experience riding the train from a commuter sense, I don't have a lot of experience with trains other than commuter rail. So, special place in my heart for the commuter trains that I took from the suburbs of Chicago into the city. If I ever visited a preservation railway, I would say that if I had, I'd probably know that. I don't mean how to say that. Railway museum. I don't believe I have visited a railway museum. For preserving trains, I think that you could get preservation funds by two ways. You could get like federal taxpayer supported grants, or you could have private funding. What use can we have for those? And I think there could definitely be a use as far as a tourism type thing. I think we have to come up with creative ways to use those historic rails that could be a partnership between the public and private entities.
When
Let's talk about some of the most important things trains have done for America. Let's start with the Golden Spike. The Golden Spike happened on May 10th, 1869. It was when the Transcontinental Railroad was completed. Jupiter and Union Pacific number 119 met up, and a 6-carat golden spike was put into the ground to mark the meeting of the railroads. In Utah, there's a state park where 2 replicas of the engines are. They reenact the Golden Spike ceremony. There's a documentary available about the building of the 2 engines. It's really interesting how they made them without any blueprints. They also fixed some design flaws. It's really interesting to watch, and if you have a spare 30 minutes, I highly recommend it. Jupiter is on display at the Smithsonian Museum. 119 wasn't as lucky, as it was scrapped in 1903. In 1949, at the Chicago Railroad Fair, Jupiter was brought out, and the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad locomotive number 35 was dressed up as a stand-in for 119. Another golden spike was driven into the ground. The Omaha Zoo, of all places, has a replica of 119. The Transcontinental Railroad helped with westward expansion, and it provided many new opportunities. This wouldn't have been possible without these 2 engines. Speaking of iconic trains, let's talk about the Santa Fe Warbonnet Scheme F7 engine. No matter who you talk to, everyone knows about this train. Most toy trains are based on this engine. So why are so few of them preserved? Let's get a background on the F7 first. Produced between February of 1949 through December of 1953, the F7s were originally going to haul freight, but they soon became the flagship of Santa Fe Enterprises, and other companies started using this engine for passenger services as well, such as Norfolk Southern. Soon they became the highest quality rail travel had to offer. Over 2,933 A units were built. These were the engines with cabs, and 1,463 B units were built. These did not have cabs. This was the number for the Santa Fe alone. The engines were very easy to maintain, so they were used for decades. However, the yard crews did not like them at all. In order to keep them sleek, there was a severe lack of handrails and ladders, so they were very hard to get in and out of. Eventually, they were demoted to freight duties, and more ladders got added. Now that you're all caught up, many of these units are still around today, but almost none in the Warbonnet scheme. I only know of 2. One is at the Museum of American Railroads. In 2000, the museum started work on recreating the iconic engine, since only one original Santa Fe cab and B unit still exists, which is shocking due to how many there were. So they had to use Canadian National number 9167. The engine was restored, with the paint being completed in 2005. After extensive work on the engine, the project was completed in 2006. It now operates at the museum and at special events. Continuing with the theme of famous locomotives, let's talk about the Big Boy, the biggest train in the world. 8 are preserved, and the Union Pacific Railroad bought one of these a few years ago, number 4014, and restored it to its original condition, but with an oil-burning tender. But before we talk about that, let's talk about the history of the engine. Union Pacific had just introduced the Challenger into its fleet. These locomotives were huge, but someone said, what if we made it bigger? And the Big Boy was born. A 212-ton locomotive, which is the biggest locomotive in the world. Anyway, these locomotives were exclusively used for freight trains. 4014 did a year-long rail tour around the country. It is now located in Houston, Texas. I think one way to start solving the problem is to invest more in rail travel and railroads. Sadly, traveling by train is not a popular way of travel anymore. But if we invest more in taking care of modern trains, some more thought might go into taking care of the old ones. If we invest more into advertising, people might be more interested in traveling by train. It might make some people discover that they really like trains, and in turn that would help people restoring trains. Also, if we invest in rail and freight travel, it might solve a problem currently facing the nation. A problem facing the nation as of writing this is a possible rail strike. If this happens, inflation will be so high that a lot of people won't be able to afford basic necessities. If we invest more in railroads, they can afford to pay their workers more, and in turn, the economy won't get worse. If the economy gets worse, people restoring trains simply won't be able to. So let's invest and give more trains a second life. We've interviewed many people. We've looked at several different famous locomotives. And some are taken good care of, and some just aren't. And that's not good. After all that trains have done, why can't we take better care of all of them? We need more funds for people trying to restore those engines, and it's time we give it to them. So that these engines and many more get to stay in preservation and get taken proper care of, so they don't meet the cutter's torch many years too late.